You know that your team sucks and mine is great. It's time for AFFL hate. Gonna make them pissed, gonna make them mad. I'm gonna do them dirty. Oh, yeah, it's the return of AFFL podcast audio sweetness, back by popular demand, mainly Gary. Let's tackle the wild card games. The return to the podcast format is like a little treat for Gary, because I'm so proud of him for making the playoffs with what was a pretty bad team and a really terrible draft. Thought I would reward his great work this year. Let's tackle his game first. The number 3 seed, Lethbrak. The number 6 seed, Little Baby Jesus. Could have been the number 1 seed. They're the 6th seed, and they are taking on water fast. This game, kind of a mirror image, which you have basically are 2 great quarterbacks and a whole bunch of iffy options after that. Hopefully one of them unexpectedly has a breakout game and can carry the day. Luck going up against Cleveland in Cleveland. Not a perfect matchup for him. Cleveland defense, not terrible. It's in Cleveland, so there certainly should be some atmospheric conditions come Sunday. On the other hand, you got Aaron Rodgers going up against a really bad Falcons defense. It's in Green Bay, so it will be cold, but that hasn't stopped Rodgers before. The only thing that might stop Rodgers, the only thing that has stopped Rodgers this year, is the Packers blowing out teams so severely that he stops passing in the second half. Give the edge to Rodgers in this one, slight one. Let's look at the backs. Jonathan Stewart for Little Baby Jesus. I'm sorry I had to say that out loud. Playing any Carolina back is clearly a desperation play. Justin Forsett is actually better than Stewart at this point, has had a much better season out of nowhere. By the way, Justin Forsett, not drafted this year, just grabbed off the free agent pile by Scott after Bernard Pierce got hurt and Taliaferro was semi-ineffective. Sort of validating Scott's theory that the draft doesn't matter, that you don't need picks. Sort of hurting Scott there is that he traded Forsett for Bishop Sankey and a 4th-round draft pick back in October. Since that trade, Forsett has scored 108 points, is currently the number 7 overall running back in the NFL. Bishop Sankey has scored 44 points. Here's the good news, the silver lining for Scott. That's not his worst trade of the year. Let's move on. Jeremy Hill going up against the Steelers. The Steelers are terrible, but Gio is back. He's going to be taking some of the carries. Maybe Hill can get a goal line plunge, but that's a lot to count on. If he doesn't get that, he's got his coach yelling at him for not blocking well enough and not running hard enough, so he might not get the points that Gary wants this week. Mike Wallace going up against Baltimore, very up and down, we'll see. Keenan Allen has had 2 great weeks in a row. He scored more in the last 2 weeks than he did in like the previous 8 weeks combined. He's going to draw Darrelle Revis this week. He is not going to have 3 great weeks in a row. That's a problem. Mohamed Sanu, okay, anybody can pretty much light up that Steelers secondary. He could have some points here, but A.J. Green is the man, and Sanu has not been as good since A.J. has returned, because obviously when Dalton's not throwing it out of bounds or to the other team, he's looking for Green. Julius Thomas might be back this week, and if he is, who pops out of the lineup? Probably Sanu is my guess, knowing Gary. We'll see if that works out from him. Tough to come back against that Buffalo defense, which is not that bad. Patriots defense, I don't like them this week. They have to travel to San Diego. San Diego has had great success against the Patriots over the past 5, 6, 7 years, probably more than any other team in the league. So I do think Rivers will have another great game against the Patriots. Not a lot of points there. As for the Little Baby Jesus, we already scoffed at Jonathan Stewart and extended our pity to the man for having to play him. Although, what are his other options? Charles Sims, Brandon Oliver, Andre Ellington is hurt. It's not looking good for the Little Baby Jesus here. Taking on water, leaking oil, you pick your metaphor here. Point is, they are struggling. Deshaun Jackson, he is questionable. He's going up against a resurgent Rams defense, and he's got Colt McCoy at his quarterback, which is amazing since last week news comes out, we're going to play Colt instead of Griffin the third. Griffin the third is probably on his way out of town. This week, sources from Virginia indicate that, hey, Griffin might start again this season. It's commonplace to talk about how the Redskins don't know what they're doing, but it is still amusing to watch. And if Jackson can't go this week again, not a lot of options for little baby Jesus. Sammy Watkins, maybe, since the game against Denver is going to be a shootout, but Aqib Talib would be on him, and he's got a dinger in his hip. Reggie Wayne, that's an option against Cleveland, except he's kind of hurt too, even though he'll play. Julian Edelman, he's kind of hurt too, even though he'll play. Really could be a severe problem for little baby Jesus here roster-wise. Steve Smith, he's been awfully quiet lately. Miami has a good defense. You don't know what's going to happen here. Here's Steve Smith in his last 5 games. 3.5, 3.6, 1.7, 14.9. That was against the Saints. 0.2. Been really up and down for Smith. And Gronk slowed down a little bit last week. Not as good. The thing I'm concerned about this week is the game is in San Diego. And I'm wondering if the porn stars that Gronk is going to invite to this game are going to drive down independently. Are they going to carpool? Is he going to shuttle them in one per night? Trading on, trading off. A lot of distractions for Gronk in San Diego. Don't expect a great game from him either. So, not great rosters for either side. Slight advantage to Gary, maybe. Oh, we didn't talk about Mike Evans. Sorry about that. He's been held down a little bit lately, partially by injury, mainly by Josh McCown. That ferocious Detroit front four is going to get all over McCown. Maybe he heaves a few up to Evans, but it's not looking good for him lately either. He's got to get a bounce-back game here if little baby Jesus is going to have any chance. So who's going to win? Well, slow down. Hang on. Don't be in such a rush all the time. The 2 playoff games are sort of interlinked because of the reseeding. Let's look at the other game. The number 4 seed, Hagak, tragically losing the Western Division last week. Timmy doesn't have any friends. The number 5 seed, this game actually started last night. 28.8 points for DeMarco Murray, but 14.4 for Martellus Bennett on the other side. Literally half as good, but it comes from a tight end. So, not so bad for Scott there. But here's the problem. Between Beckham, Golden Tate, of course Demarius, McCamey has somebody in his lineup that's going to match the 14.4 that Bennett posted. That's going to wash. Unless Lynch has a great game out of nowhere, and it's been a month since he's had that 40-point game, and since then he's only had pretty average or below average games. Unless Lynch puts up 28, Scott doesn't have anybody that's going to match Murray's points. So what he needs is somebody from the Hagak side to basically put up a 2, average it out. Maybe Scott catches up to him. The great Drew Brees, the man upon whom Scott staked his entire season, goes up against Carolina at home. Carolina has been very bad lately, especially holding the pass. And Brees, boy, wasn't he great last week against the Steelers. It was all so worth it. He's had 25 points the week before against Baltimore, 28 points against the Steelers. He's hot all of a sudden. Maybe he keeps it rolling. Maybe he validates all those draft picks sent away by Scott. Lynch, he has been dinged up. A bad back. It seems like if you have a bad back, you don't want to be running and getting hit by guys in the back and the front and the top and the bottom. But that Philly defense, they haven't really been slowing anybody down. So maybe Lynch can bounce back again this week. Pierre Thomas, he is back. He's doing basically nothing. Catches a couple of swing passes a game. 5.6 and 3.7 in his last 2 games. And if he can't score against the Steelers, how is he going to score against the Panthers? Kendall Wright, back into the lineup. He was benched last week when he scored 18. Scott's chasing not last week's points. Wright is a little dinged up. Mettenberger's dinged up, so I think Jake Locker plays. Plus, Wright himself is questionable with a cracked bone in his hand. Although Odell Beckham would say otherwise, I think it's kind of important to have both hands when you need to catch a football. And if it's Locker and a banged up hand, as bad as that Giants defense is, that's a lot for Kendall Wright to overcome. Torrey Smith, hot lately, catching all the touchdowns. He might get some points against Miami. It depends on if Brent Grimes draws Steve Smith or Torrey Smith. We'll see. We talked about Bennett, Gostkowski, fine, 4th-round pick of a kicker. Okay. Texans defense going up against the Jaguars. All right, he'll get some points there. Clowney is out for the season, kind of a wash, but of course J.J. Watt is still there, and Bortles likes to turn the ball over. Could be a pick 6 in this game. Don't rule it out. This game could get out of control in a hurry. As for Hagak, at one point, looked like the best team in the league. Now, shamefully, playing in the wild card matchup. Not even the best team in their division. I don't love Ben this week since he's got a good pass defense that's coming back at least. And Ben either does or doesn't have a broken bone in his wrist. Plus, it's been terrible lately. Yeah, he saved last week against the Saints with a lot of garbage time points. But before the last 5 minutes, he had about 9 points. The week before, he had 9 against Tennessee. The week before that, 11 against the Jets. Don't love Ben here. I like Rivers a lot better, but hey, that's just me. What do I know? I'm just the number 2 seed in the league. Murray, we talked about his great game. Foster going up against the Jaguars. That's always good news for him. He's going to get at least 20 points there. Odell Beckham going up against Tennessee. He is spectacular, but he doesn't put up the regular week in, week out points, but he's been steady last few weeks. 11.9, 9.3, 26.6 in that famous catch game against Dallas. He got 6 bonus points for the one-handed catch. 9.4 last week. Steady. It's enough. It contributes. Gets the job done. Golden Tate, Tampa Bay is in shambles. He should be able to get some points there. I know Calvin is hogging the ball now that he's back, but Tate should be able to get hit. Demarius going up against Buffalo. We'll see if Julius is back. I think if Julius is back, that'll open things up for Demarius. But again, Demarius at least is at the worst going to put up 10 points. You know, Hagak's got guys who their floor is where the ceiling is for some of Scott's guys. Cairo Santos, he's just a kicker. Who cares? Dolphins going up against Baltimore. It's in Miami, which is an advantage to that. Baltimore not quite as good on the road as they are at home. Dolphins defense has been okay. Not good enough last week. Couldn't get the job done against the Jets. Couldn't stop the run to save their lives against the Jets. But good enough. So, we got one matchup, Little Baby Jesus and Lethbrak, where there's a slight advantage for one team. Then we have a Gak versus Timmy Doesn't Have Any Friends, where there is a monstrous advantage for one team. Now, what's going to happen in these games? If this was a book with a moral to learn lessons at the end of it, what would happen this week is that Little Baby Jesus would beat Gary, Scott would beat McCamey, I would play Scott next week in the playoffs. Scott would then beat me in the playoffs 66-64. But life is not a book. Life is life. And although that might sound deep and philosophical, it's really garbage words. The point is, things don't always end up so neat and tidy. Things don't always go the way we want them to. I know that there is nothing more than the other 11 owners of the AFFL would like to see more than Scott beat me in the playoffs next week. But it's just not going to happen because he's not going to play me next week. Hagak, 104. Timmy Doesn't Have Any Friends, 65. A shameful, shameful end of the season for Scott. Yes, technically he makes the playoffs, so you can count the season as a success by one metric. On the other hand, his playoffs were over in a hurry, and he looked terrible doing it. He wasn't able to preview any players because he made the playoffs, which wouldn't have mattered because he's not able to draft any players next year. The whole thing is going to be great. Cannot be looking forward to that anymore next year. Anyways, McCamey is moving on. But that doesn't answer all of the seedings for next week. It still matters what happens between Little Baby Jesus and Lethbridge. If Lethbridge wins, Hagak goes and plays Animal House. If Little Baby Jesus wins, Hagak gets the rematch that they so desperately crave against the ISIS next week. So, how's it going to shake out? What's going to happen? Well, what's going to happen is that the 1 o'clock games are going to finish with Gary in the lead, 60-25. It's going to be pretty ugly. In the 4 o'clock games, Broncos defense not going to do a ton for Little Baby Jesus. Then we get to the night game. Gronkowski, 15 points. But let's give another 8 to Allen and the Patriots defense combined. 68-43 when we go to bed Sunday night. Last hope for Little Baby Jesus is Aaron Rodgers on Monday night. Can he make up a 25-point deficit? It's a lot of points, but it's within the realm of possibility. Rodgers has scored 34 points once this year already. It could happen. He's going to get off to a hot first half. 14 points in the first half. Gary going to be taking off his turtleneck because it's squeezing his neck too tight, even though it's his lucky Manny Pacquiao turtleneck that he likes to wear the gold chain on the outside around the neck. He's going to take the chain off, take the turtleneck off. He's going to strip down to just a triple extra large white t-shirt and carpenter jeans. Brenda's going to be like, what's the matter? And he's going to be like, I'm stressed out! And Aaron Rodgers is going to put up 16 points in the second half and beat me. But it's not going to happen. 68-66. The final score in this one. What garbage. How dare you teams come into the playoffs and not even beat 70 points when Riggins Riggs is on the outside looking in, previewing players. By the way, just like to point this out. I make the playoffs pretty much every year, 3 out of 4 years. I never get to preview any players. Kind of unfair. Just wanted to put that out there. Maybe I want to preview some players. I can't help it if I'm so good every year. Anyways, Lethbridge limps across the finish line to a win. And what happens the following week? Semi-final weekend. ISIS versus Lethbridge. Hagak versus Animal House. And friends, we will see you there.